Okay, students, today we're going to go over the battery service. I know we've done it in class before, but many of you, if not all of you, need to be refreshed on what we're doing, because we're not just checking batteries now, we're checking charging systems, and we're talking about battery functions. Let's go through the review really quick. Battery, if it's out of the car or you're just testing the battery itself, that's engine off, that's EO, is 12.6 volts. That's on the test, remember that. Called cranking amps. It's a rating that's on the top of the sticker on the battery. We'll show you that in a minute. Minimum volts. During the time the engine is running. During that time, you've got the air conditioner on, you've got your heater on, you've got your lights on, you've got everything you can think of on, all of your accessories. Minimum should be 13.5 volts. Maximum should be not over 15.5 volts. The battery cell check, we're going to get into that, but each cell, there's 6 of them on each 12-volt battery, and each cell should have a reading of 2.2 volts per cell. That's a thing you need to remember here in a minute. On the cold cranking amp test, that should pass over 90%. We'll show you how to use a little math to figure that out. And the reserve voltage during cranking conditions. During the time the car is cranking, not after it's running, but during the time, before it starts, we should have a minimum left over of 9.6 volts, very, very minimum. So with those figures in mind, let's get to testing. Okay, so we're going to now do a cell test. We're going to put the battery on direct volts, and the reading is up here. So with that in mind, let's go to the battery. Okay, so here's what we got. We got the positive side here. We got the positive touching the positive terminal. And we literally dip this probe into the acid, and it says right there we've got 12 volts. So the next one should be around 10, and it is. The next one should be around 8, and it's close enough. The next one should be down to 6, close enough. The next one down to 4, close enough. And the next one down to 2, close enough. Now, we can check the efficiency of each cell, but if I go 12, 10, and then 10 here, that means that's a dead cell. So that's how you find the cell. You should see a decrease of 2.2 volts per cell on a perfect battery, but no battery is perfect. So that's our cell check for today. That's how we do a cell check. Now, first thing I want to do is check for terminals. Are they loose? Well, this one here you can see is quite loose. So that's going to cause a problem, and that's going to cause the alternator to overcharge or to be running at full strength, 125%, because the connection here is bad, just so you know. I'm reading up here, 725 cold cranking amps is what the battery's built for. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and hook this meter up to the battery. It's an electronic meter, and we're going to see what kind of battery reserve cranking voltage we have. So if you can see these gauges, I'm going to go ahead and go up to 740, because this doesn't do 25. So 740, and then I push test. Now it's testing the battery, and it says it's got 510 cold cranking amps available. So what we're going to do now is take 510 and divide 725 into it to get a percentage. And that comes out to be, we have the battery's at 70%, and 70% is below 90. That battery is defective, and you can also see it's reading low right there. So that is how we do our cold cranking amp test. Next comes the reserve battery voltage. So let's go ahead and test that. Now here's how this goes. We start by looking at the battery, and it says there's 12.6 volts in that battery. That's great. Now Berkeley is going to start it for us, but before he does, I'm going to hold that down arrow. So I'm going to hold the down arrow. While I hold the down arrow, Berkeley's going to start the car, and we're going to see how much reserve voltage is left over to run the computer, the fuel injectors, the fuel pump, the ignition coils, and all the accessories. Let's go ahead, Berkeley, and see what we have. He's got 10 volts left over, so he's still in pretty good shape. Now we're going to let up on the arrow right here to see if he's going to be charging. Watch this. He's charging at 14 volts, which is the charging system is working. So with that in mind, Berkeley can shut it off. And we see that we go back to about 12.8, so we know that the battery is jumped up a little bit and it is charging. What is our diagnosis? Well, we have a couple of weak cells that showed some discrepancies down in here of about 0.5 volts. We had a loose battery clamp, and we need to do a battery service. So we're going to continue that here in a moment. Called the toaster tester. This is actually going to put a physical load on the battery. Now what we're doing is we have it hooked up and we're reading almost 12, almost 13 volts. It says it's in the red, but this is just reading voltage. But I'm going to say, hey, we're plenty good. You can see where the needle is right here. Now as I push this button here, I'm going to light these toaster coils up, just like inside your toaster. That's why we call it the toaster tester. As that goes down, we're going to see that 1,000 amps is here, 800 is there, 600, 400, and 200. And as soon as the needle goes into the yellow, that lets me know it's a weak battery. So let's go ahead and turn it on. You can see the needle starting to drop as the load increases, and these coils are getting hot. I can put my hand here, and I can feel the heat coming out of those holes. We're down to 1,000 amps, and it looked like, according to this, we had between 1,000 and 800 amps available for starting. Big difference between the electronic tester and the toaster tester. So let's keep that in mind. These coils are hot enough that, yeah, I could cook a piece of toast on there. Just 3, 2, 1. Okay, now one of the biggest things we miss is the alternator here needs to be turned by a belt. But if the belt is too loose, then the alternator cannot charge because the belt skips over the pulley once the alternator starts to load up and put resistance down. We can see from the pointer here that we're way loose. We're way into this area here. We should be way up, say, into this area here. So this belt is too loose, and it could be a problem as far as turning this alternator to do its job. So belt tension is extremely important, especially at idle conditions. Hang on a second. Okay, you ready? Okay, we're going to go ahead now and remove the battery by taking the negative off first. Why? Because we don't want to short circuit something by taking the positive and having a wrench or a piece of something touch the positive while the negative is hooked up. You will have a spark. So the negative comes off first, then the positive comes off, then the top of the battery comes off, and then you notice that this needs to be cleaned up. So we'll clean that up in a minute. But right now, let's go ahead and pull the battery out by using the proper equipment. Now this is the battery puller. The battery puller should be able to go down in here. It's adjustable. You can see how that works, and it pulls it straight out. So we got the battery puller straight out, and we have the battery tray here, and now I'll go ahead and we'll clean this up right now. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and clean up some of these battery hold down connections. And you can see that we've got them fairly cleaned up. Look how nice those threads turned out. That's what we want to do to hold the battery down and get good grounding. Okay, we're going to go ahead and clean the battery off. We're going to scrub it really good, get the sides, get all that done. Now, get underneath the battery. Don't tip it all the way over. Just tip it a little bit to clean it off, and look how nice and clean that battery is. I use baking soda a lot of the times to do the cleaning, but today we didn't need it. So we got that all taken care of. We're going to go back with our battery holder here. Again, don't handle the battery with your hands. Use the holder. Okay, we'll get in there and see what happens next. On a side note, make sure you have your safety glasses on. Very important. And go ahead and dry the battery off like this. Once you get the battery dried off, then you can reinstall it. Okay, so now I'm just going to blow the battery box out. And now when you're blowing these cables out, always blow into a rag so you don't get metal particles everywhere. And always make sure that the battery terminals are nice and clean inside. And to do that, I always make sure that I clean them with one of these battery brushes here. You can see how nice and clean that battery contact points. This is what keeps the alternator from burning out too early, is because you've got good contact. Now I'm going to go ahead and blow the filings off again into a rag. And again into the rag. Okay, now next we're going to drop the battery in and do it back up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put the hold down clamps on the batteries. Now I recommend strongly, I can't recommend strongly enough, to go ahead and put these anti-corrosion felts onto the battery. The anti-corrosion felts also come with a terminal grease protector, and it's a pretty good product. It comes with each of the batteries terminal kits right here. The only thing I don't like about them is getting them open. There's always a problem getting these open. So you got to get your knife out and hope that you got them cut deep enough. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and put some terminal protector on here. Okay, now the first one I'm going to hook up is the positive. And I'll put some terminal protector on the positive. It's called an inhibitor, is what it actually is. And then we'll put some on the negative, an inhibitor, and spray it on there, just kind of melt it out there. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and tighten it up. On two, on one, go. Okay, so we got a new clamp on here. We got the dielectric inhibitor paste on here. We had to add a little wire on here because these were bonded together. We couldn't necessarily put a new clamp on. So we're going to go ahead and finish our job. Just, I'm going to blow any top stuff off and finish the job with a nice pink spray, including the bolts here. Always spray these bolts so they don't get rusty again. And that is one of our better jobs that we've done today on battery service. Students, this concludes our battery service. Make sure you remember your numbers and make sure you remember how this procedure went. Thank you.